So it's Friday, and of course, we're going to delve into another conspiracy, and this time we're going to talk about UFOs in the recently released CIA document. I don't know. Okay, so this document, obviously, I'll link below, but this document, I've read this before a long time ago, back in the early days of the internet. And I'll show you, I guess, somewhat of proof that that was the case at the bottom of the document. So I want to say off the onset, right? It's only a one-page document, and here's the tricky thing about this thing that now, as I'm older and a little bit wiser, I would like to think, I don't. I have my high suspicions that this is actually real. Government agencies, intelligence agencies anyway, play all kinds of games, and unless you're really in on it, and even within these special operations, do we truly know why they do what they do? Maybe this is some sort of signal for some undercover op that they've got going on, and they tell their sources that, as soon as we publish something ridiculous, do X or Y. If we don't, you know what I mean? Like it's all smoke and mirrors and games, right? So what's true, what's not true, who knows? But nonetheless, it is an interesting read. It's just a one-page document. And I right from what makes me suspect that it's not entirely depicting reality is a couple of things. So let's dissect this thing, right? So the document begins by saying that first off, it's not even a CIA document per se. The source is this Kiev Holos Ukraini in Ukrainian. So it's a newspaper article, and apparently, so if you actually read the document, right? It was published in the, quote, authoritative magazine Canadian Weekly World News, unquote. And so within that report, apparently, the U.S. intelligence has obtained a 250-page file on the attack by a UFO on a military unit in Siberia. Okay. The file contains not only many documentary photographs and drawings, but also testimonies by actual participants in the events. So that's so misleading. Well, I think it's misleading anyway, because later down, in like 3 paragraphs down, it tells us that only 2 people survived. So it's clearly their testimonies then, right? So who are these people? Maybe in the 250-page file they know. In any case, there's it says, quote, a picture of revenge of the part of extraterrestrial creatures, a picture that makes one's blood freeze, unquote. Okay. According to the KGB materials, a quite low-flying spaceship in the shape of a saucer appeared above a military unit that was conducting a routine training maneuvers. For unknown reasons, somebody unexpectedly launched a surface-to-air missile and hit the UFO. How can it be unexpected if something that's not supposed to be in the area is observing the exercise of a military unit? I don't think there's a military on the planet that wouldn't shoot at it, right? How is that unexpected? What does that even mean? Okay, but fine. It says it fell to Earth not far away, and 5 short humanoids with large heads and large black eyes emerged from it. Okay. So the classic UFO, or what aliens supposedly look like, right? It is stated that in the testimonies by the 2 soldiers who remained alive. So that's already, right? So at the top, they're telling us that testimonies by the survivors, and now they're telling us that there's 2. Why not just tell us 2 from the get-go, right? Why go around this circular roundabout language? But whatever. After freeing themselves from the debris, the aliens came close together, and they merged into a single object that acquired a spherical shape. Okay. That object began to buzz and hiss sharply and then became brilliant white. Okay. In a few seconds, the spheres, and this word kind of threw me off. So did the thing break up into multiple spheres, or is this just a typo? Apparently grew larger, and then it flared in extremely bright light, and then it turned 23 people into basically stone. Only 2 soldiers who stood in the shade and were less exposed to the luminous explosion survived. So these are the only 2 people that can tell us what happened, right? They are the ones that gave the testimony. You can infer that pretty easily. Why not just tell us from the get-go? Anyhow, the KGB report goes on to say that the remains of the UFO and the petrified soldiers were transferred to some special military secret base, blah, blah, blah. And then this is where it gets kind of weird, and it just makes you suspect that this is not entirely I just have my high suspicion. I don't think this is real. I'm just going to say it. So it says that specialists assume that a source of energy that is still unknown to Earthlings instantly changes the structure of the soldier's living organisms. Okay, fair enough, right? You can kind of infer that. Here's where they're clearly BSing us, right? Having transformed it into a substance whose molecular composition is no different from that of limestone. How do they know that? Did they actually do the studies and then they showed us like the chemical composition of limestone and then compare it to the chemical composition of the remains of the quote 23 soldiers? Did they do that? At least in this single page release, it doesn't say that. Anyway, then this is where it gets kind of like fantasy Star Warsy, right? A CIA representative stated, if the who interviewed the CIA representative, by the way? Do they routinely give like assessments about stuff that they read in a Canadian magazine that was taken from a Ukrainian newspaper? Is that common? I don't know, maybe, right? If the KGB file corresponds to reality, so already, right, it's a CIA representative that says that if it's true, then this is an extremely menacing case, right? The aliens possess such weapons and technology that go beyond all of our assumptions. They can stand up for themselves if attacked. And then it ends. Yeah, anyway, so this was released, as you can see, May 2000. So when I was in high school in the early days of the internet, I did read this thing, obviously not off the CIA website. It was just some random UFO stuff, the kind of thing you're, browsing about when you're bored, basically. And I read this exact same case. Now, is this true? Who knows? Like, again, intelligence agencies play all kinds of games, and only the people that are actually on it know. So, in any case, let me know what you guys think, and unless you guys have more information about this thing, or is there something I missed? Anyway, you can find the link to the actual report down below, and let's just keep the conversation going, eh?